So here we are at the bottom of Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, going on to Mem Aleph Amud Beis, and we have a Mishnah. Hameicham, which was a big urn, Shepineu, that they evacuated it. What does that mean? It's going to be a mystery as to what that means. So this Meicham, this big urn that they evacuated, Lo yitein teichot tzoinen, don't fill it up. Well, let me correct it. Don't put inside of it cold water, bishvil she'echamu, in order that the cold water should get hot. Aval noizinu letoichai oy letoicha kois kedei lafshiron. But you can't take that cold water and put it inside it, this big urn, or else inside a cup, in order that it should get warm. So you can't put in cold water to get hot, you can put it in to get warm. But the Gemara is going to start off, and this is one of the great illustrations of how Mishnayos are a mystery. When Rabbi Yehuda Nasi decided to redact the Mishnah, he deliberately constructed them in a way that they were essentially not a complete text. In fact, not a text at all. They were just a spurring on to a discussion that will create a lot of talk. In other words, Torah Sheba'al Peh. And that's exactly what happens in this mystery Mishnah, as we're about to see in the Gemara. The Gemara goes, "My Kama, what are you talking about? What is the Mishnah talking about?" Part 1 of the Gemara. On my Rava, keeping our head, that's a question. My Kama, we just don't know what the Mishnah is talking about. There's too much confusion. What did you take off? Evacuated? Did you take it off the fire? The fire? What are you talking about? My Kama. Rav Adabar Masna, the first answer to the solving the riddle of the Mishnah is Rav Adabar Masna, and he says Hachikama, remember, is a crucial, critical Talmudic key phrase which indicates there is about to happen a logic overriding language, or logic language override, but some people find it easy to remember LOL. Logic overrides language. So our thought process when we have a Mishnah like this is going to compel us to say the Mishnah means something that's not explicit in the words, and here we go. This big urn that you evacuated from it, you emptied from it hot water, you can't add in a little bit of water that will then become super hot, because the walls of this big thick metal container are super hot because they've had hot water in them all day long. But you can fill them up to the top of this urn, because if you put in loads of water, it will just make them warm, it will not cook them. And that's Pshat in our Mishnah according to Rav Ada Bar Masna. And that's part 2 of our Gemara, answering up the mystery of our Mishnah when it said the urn that they evacuated. What did they evacuate? They took out the water. You can put in a little bit of water. Sorry, you cannot put a little bit of water because that's going to make it way too hot. It's cooking. You can't put a lot of water because that's not cooking. It doesn't get to the point of a yad soiledis boy, scalding heat. Now the Gemara part 3 asks a kasha. V'haloi mitzaref, but is it not mitzaref, which is firing, as one could say in the context of metal, to complete the process of the metal being smelted. I think it's a word, even though now it sounds like a Jewish surname. Smelting the metal. So in order for that to occur, the final process after it's been, I suppose, heated up in the fire, it's dropped into freezing cold water, which then strengthens the metal, as we saw actually on our previous Amud, that if you do that with yourself after your hot bath, you have a cold shower, same idea, very different substance. Over here, when you put in the cold water, granted, there's not a problem of cooking, but there's a problem that you're completing the vessel. It's called makeh b'patish. You're doing the final stages of what the vessel needs to become a proper solid vessel. So how is that possible? The Gemara answers in part 4, Rabbi Shimon, because we're going according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon that we're now familiar with, that he says when you don't intend it, you're not looking to I wish I knew that word, I want to say the word fire, but it's not the word fire, to solidify, to whatever. The final step in the process of making metal vessel, into a metal vessel, that wasn't your intention. Your intention was to warm up the water. So therefore, that was a side thing that occurred. Now, obviously, we know the principle of the Reb Shimon is that the only time a Dov Shem is covered, when you don't intend, is permitted, is when it's not inevitable that the malach will occur. So we have to say, to some degree, that it's not inevitable that there will be a firing or a mitzaref over here. Now, in part 5, we have a kasha from logic through the words of Abaye. Maskiv Abaye, midi meicham shepina mimenu mayim ketoni. He says, 1 second, your logic overrides language was taking things too far. It didn't say an urn that you took the water out of it. Meicham shepineu ketoni. It says the urn that you took it away. What does that mean? Part 6 gives us an answer. Rav Abaye has come to argue about Masna, and he says, Omar Abaye, Hachika Omar. This is what, again, it's a Hachika Omar. He also needs to result to a logic language override, but a very different one to that of Rav Ada. He says, Hachika Omar, Meicham ha-meicham shepinehu, the urn that they took off the fire, and it's still got hot water inside of it, even though it's off the fire. You can't put in a little bit of water in order that that water that you're adding in to the existing hot water will also become hot. But you can add in loads of cold water, which will give a resultant warm water left in this urn. And as a inference, and a urn that you emptied out all the water, so then you can't put in any water because you will be completing the process of finishing off this particular vessel, which is mitzaref. Also, and of course, Abaye is subscribing to the opinion of Rebbe Yehuda that says even though you didn't intend it to be, it still is prohibited, and that draws to a close part 5 of the Gemara. In part 6 of the Gemara, we have Rav and Shmuel going back to the Mishnah, and they're going to say something which is cryptic, which will then be re-explained. And we're on to part 6. We only learned, and Rav is going in the world of Rav Ada, and he's saying that Rav Ada said it's only permitted to add in lots of cold water because that's to make it cool. Aval l'tzaref also, but to actually finish off this vessel, that's prohibited. Shmuel Amar afilu l'tzaref na'im mutar, and Shmuel says no, it's perfectly okay to finish off the vessel, to mitzaref the vessel. L'tzaref l'chadchila, the Gemara in part 7, Mishari, to actually finish the vessel. Shmuel's permitting us to do that with that full intent. That's not, no one says that's permitted. Ela in part 8, Itmar, we're going to do a re-explanation of the opinions of Rav and Shmuel. Amar Rav, shiur lahavshir aval shiur l'tzaref also. Says Rav, the only thing which was prohibited was the amount of water that it would take to remain cool. So, sorry, let me say this better. The only thing that was permitted was if you put in the amount of water to make that water warm. But if you put in enough water to finish off firing this vessel, to be mitzvah this vessel, which means essentially that you filled it completely, that would be also. Ushmul Amar afilu shir l'tzaref mutar. But Shmuel says even if you filled it up completely, it's still okay. So it's quite interesting because it comes out that Rav and Shmuel both are going in the world of Rav Ada, but they're differing over the Dov Shem Miskaven part, that even though Rav is subscribing to the opinion of Rav Ada, he gets around the Dov Shem Miskaven by the amount of water that's added in. So it's a tricky little machlokes we have in front of us. Definitely more to dive into. So now the Gemara goes and says, "L'maimin to Shmuel Rabbi Shimon." They want to daf min beis Aleph now. Does that mean Rabbi Shimon that Shmuel holds like Rabbi Shimon? But 1 second, for Amar Shmuel, didn't Shmuel say Mechabin Gachel Shel Mateches B'Shus Rab B'Shvil Shelo Yazuku Bo? Rabbi Shmuel says that you can extinguish a coal of metal, meaning a cindering piece of metal in the B'Shus Rab, which is pretty much a danger. If you step on it, you can really hurt yourself. In order that people shouldn't get damaged by it. But you can't do the same thing if you've got a fire of a wooden fire. You can't put out that wooden fire. What's the difference between the two? Well, a metal fire doesn't produce charcoal, which would be the problem of extinguishing according to the Torah law, whereas a wooden one will be. But nevertheless, it comes out that over here you're doing a melacha not for the intention of the melacha. You're trying to eliminate the damage, and yet Shmuel says it's prohibited in the case of wood. Even if it would be a wooden coal, a wooden kind of wooden cindering thing, so that would also be prohibited, and so it would also be permitted because it's Davar She'ein Miskaven. So we see that Shmuel says not Davar She'ein Miskaven. So now the Gemara says no. But Davar She'ein Miskaven, and this is going to be part 9. But Davar She'ein Miskaven, so like Rabbi Shimon, in something where it's not your intention to do it, then he does hold like Rabbi Shimon. But Melach She'ein Tzricha L'Gufa, but when it's a melacha that's not required for its end purpose, so like Rabbi Yehuda. That's where he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. So Shmuel actually goes in two different ways. So I just want to go back. There are these two things which are so ridiculously similar that it's hard to differentiate between them. And one is the Davar She'ein Miskaven, and the other one is the Melach She'ein Tzricha L'Gufa. Davar She'ein Miskaven means I'm dragging a bench, and in the process of dragging the bench, I make a furrow in the soil. Not a problem. Why? Because I didn't want to make a furrow in the soil. I wasn't going to plow. I was dragging a bench. So the thing that occurred, the melacha that occurred, the work that occurred was as a side issue of what I was doing. And Melacha She'ein Tzricha L'Gufa means I want to do that melacha. I want to do it. The classic example is you dig a hole. You dig a hole for the sand, meaning you want to dig a hole, but you don't want to use the hole as a point of building, which would be the point of plowing. You just want the sand to get out of it. So you're doing melacha, but you don't need it for the melacha. You need it for something on the side. The difference between the two is, in the case of Davar She'ein Miskaven, your intention is not to do the melacha, and the melacha occurs as a side benefit. In the case of Melach She'ein Tzricha L'Gufa, your intention is yes to do the melacha, but not for the purpose that the melacha was designed for. So over here the Gemara says, seemingly the Gemara wants to say, well, if you hold of Reb Shimon in regard to Davar She'ein Miskaven, you probably hold of Reb Shimon in regard to Melach She'ein Tzricha L'Gufa, and therefore why do you forbid the putting out of the wooden coal? And the answer is no. In Davar She'ein Miskaven, he does yes hold like Reb Shimon, and that's why I pin him to the filling up of this big urn of water, even though it's going to be a mitzaref. But in Melach She'ein Tzricha L'Gufa, which is over here, your intention is to put it out, but you don't want it for the purpose of melacha. So that's going to be, he's going to like Rabbi Yehuda, which is its asur. And now in part 10, so therefore we can deduce from the fact that you can't damage people. You have to do something to avoid people being hurt in the Rishus HaRabim, even though it's a rabbinic prohibition. If you see a thorn in the Rishus HaRabim, you can push it less than Dal Amas at a time. But if it's in the Karmelis, which is only a rabbinical prohibition, you can pick it up and take it out the way, because the Rabbanan wanted people to be protected and safe. And that is the end of Daf Mem Aleph Amud Aleph. Mem Aleph Amud Beis, and beginning Mem Beis Amud Aleph. Stay with us for more exciting Torah.